the Caribbean Sea. February 15th, 2026. Somewhere in the warm waters south of Puerto Rico, a steel leviathan drifts under a sky bruised with the grey light of pre-dawn. She is a tanker, one of those anonymous workhorses of global commerce, her hull riding low in the water under the immense weight of nearly 2 million barrels of crude oil. Her transponder has been dark for weeks. Her name has been painted over at least twice. Her flag state is a legal fiction, a registration of convenience purchased from a nation that asks no questions. To the naked eye, she is a ghost, a vessel that does not exist on any legitimate shipping manifest in the world. But the United States Navy can see ghosts. From the flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most powerful warship ever constructed, a pair of MH-60S Seahawk helicopters lift into the Caribbean darkness. Below them, a guided missile destroyer cuts a white furrow through the black water at 30 knots. Aboard a Coast Guard cutter running parallel, a Marine boarding team checks their fast rope gloves one final time. The operation has been rehearsed. The intelligence has been confirmed. The federal warrant, signed by a judge in the Southern District of Florida, is tucked into the team leader's vest pocket. Within the hour, United States forces will seize their 9th sanctioned Venezuelan oil tanker in just over 2 months, a pace of maritime interdiction not seen since the Second World War. The Pentagon's announcement later that morning is clinical, almost routine. Another tanker, another violation of sanctions, another blow to the economic architecture of a regime Washington has declared a narco-terrorist state. But there is nothing routine about what is happening in these waters, what is unfolding in the Caribbean in the winter of 2026 is the culmination of an 85-year-old American doctrine, one that treats oil not merely as a commodity, but as a weapon, and the sea lanes that carry it as arteries to be severed at will. To understand how the most powerful military on Earth came to be chasing tankers through the Caribbean, like revenue cutters hunting rum runners, you have to go back to the moment the United States first discovered the intoxicating power of controlling who gets oil and who does not. Is 1941. Europe is burning. Britain besieged. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, constitutionally barred from entering the war but determined to shape its outcome, signs the Lend-Lease Act on March the 11th. The legislation is remembered primarily as America's arsenal of democracy. $50 billion in aid, roughly $800 billion in today's currency, flowing to allied nations in the form of tanks, aircraft, and food. But there is another dimension to Lend-Lease that is less celebrated and far more consequential for the world we inhabit now. To ensure those supplies reach their destination, Roosevelt authorizes the United States Navy to patrol the Atlantic sea lanes and, critically, to stop, board, and seize any vessel suspected of carrying goods to the Axis powers, oil above all else. This is the birth of something profound. Not just a wartime expedient, but a doctrine. The United States establishes for itself the right to interdict commerce on the open ocean in the name of national security. The legal architecture is crude in 1941, little more than executive orders and the implicit threat of American naval supremacy. But it will be refined, codified, and expanded over the following decades, until it becomes the most potent instrument of coercion in Washington's arsenal. More devastating than any bomb, more precise than any missile. The ability to decide who sells oil and who buys it, the ability to strangle an economy without firing a single shot, or, when necessary, while firing a great many shots. The Cold War transforms this doctrine from a wartime tool into a permanent feature of American grand strategy. In 1953, when Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalizes his country's oil industry, threatening the Anglo-American consortium that controls it, the CIA orchestrates a coup to remove him. The message reverberates through every oil-producing nation on Earth: nationalize at your peril. A year later, Guatemala's Jacobo Arbenz falls to a similar operation. The pattern is established. The United States will tolerate no challenge to the architecture of oil extraction that sustains the Western order. Venezuela watches and learns. For decades, it plays the game carefully, allowing American and European multinationals to extract its staggering reserves, the largest proven oil deposits on the planet. But in 1976, President Carlos Andrés Pérez nationalizes the industry, creating Petróleos de Venezuela, PDVSA, and buying out companies like ExxonMobil for $1.5 billion. Washington accepts the terms, barely. The Cold War demands Latin American stability, but the resentment festers. Venezuela has crossed a line claiming sovereign control over the one resource America considers too important to leave in anyone else's hands. Then comes Hugo Chavez. When the firebrand former paratrooper sweeps to power in 1999 on a wave of populist rage, Washington's worst fears materialize. Chavez doesn't just control Venezuelan oil, he weaponizes it. He redirects PDVSA's revenue streams over $700 billion by the time of his death in 2013 into social programs, regional alliances, and, most provocatively, deep partnerships with Iran and Russia. He uses oil as a geopolitical tool, offering discounted crude to Caribbean and Central American nations in exchange for diplomatic loyalty, building a counter-American bloc in Washington's own backyard. He is, in the eyes of the American security establishment, doing exactly what the United States does, using oil as leverage, except he is doing it against them. The response begins slowly. In 2006, and again in 2008, the Bush administration slapped sanctions on PDVSA executives, accusing them of narco-trafficking. The charges are not fabricated. The corruption within Venezuela's oil apparatus is genuine and staggering. But the sanctions serve a dual purpose. They establish the legal predicate for treating Venezuelan oil infrastructure not as a commercial enterprise, but as a criminal one. Every barrel that flows from PDVSA becomes, in the eyes of American law, potentially tainted, a product of narco-terrorism rather than legitimate commerce. When Nicolás Maduro inherits the revolution after Chávez's death, the screws tighten relentlessly. The Trump administration's first term designates Maduro's inner circle and the cartel of the Suns, the military cabal that controls PDVSA, as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. $7 billion in Venezuelan assets are frozen. American prosecutors estimate that over $2 billion in drug profits have been laundered through oil tanker shipments, turning every vessel carrying Venezuelan crude into both a sanctions violation and a potential drug trafficking case. But Venezuela adapts. It builds what intelligence agencies call a shadow fleet, tankers registered under flags of convenience, their transponders disabled, their hulls repainted, their names changed, from port to port. They load crude in Venezuelan waters under cover of darkness, transfer their cargo ship to ship in open ocean to avoid detection, and deliver to buyers in China, India, Turkey, and through Iranian intermediaries. At its peak, the shadow fleet moves. Hundreds of millions of dollars in oil per month. It is one of the most sophisticated sanctions evasion networks in history, and it is about to be destroyed. September 2025. The Pentagon launches Operation Southern Spear, a name chosen with deliberate historical resonance. Over 30 coordinated boat strikes kill 115 alleged narco smugglers in Caribbean and Venezuelan coastal waters. The operation is a declaration of intent, a message that the United States is no longer content to sanction and indict from a distance. It is coming to the water. On December 10th, the tanker skipper becomes the first seizure. 1.8 million barrels of sanctioned Venezuelan and Iranian crude taken under a federal warrant authorized by Attorney General Pam Bondi. A week later, President Trump orders a full naval blockade. The carrier strike group led by the Gerald R. Ford repositions to the southern Caribbean. The Centuries is intercepted on December 20th. The Marinera follows, caught mid-transfer, in a classic shadow fleet evasion maneuver. Then comes January, and the operation transforms from economic warfare into something far more kinetic. On January 3rd, 2026, Caracas itself is struck. In a raid involving over 150 aircraft, American forces and CIA operators capture Nicolás Maduro in what Venezuelan officials will later describe as an act of war that kills over 100 people. The regime does not collapse immediately, but it is decapitated. And in the chaos that follows, the tanker seizures accelerate. The M. Sophia, her transponder dark for 5 months, is taken on January 7th. 2 days later, the Olena, the Minerva M, and the Bella Y fall in rapid succession, the last flagged for direct Hezbollah financial links. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth coordinates the naval operations. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem manages the legal designations. The Gerald R. Ford's strike group enforces the blockade with a visible, overwhelming presence. By the time the 9th tanker is seized on February 15th, Venezuela's oil exports have collapsed by 90%. A $10 billion annual trade has been reduced to a trickle. The economic strangulation is nearly complete. Stand back from the operational details, and the pattern emerges with crystalline clarity. What the United States is executing in the Caribbean in 2026 is not an improvisation. It is not a reaction to a crisis. It is the final, decisive application of a doctrine that began with Roosevelt's Lend-Lease patrols, was refined through Cold War coups against oil nationalizers, was legalized through decades of sanctions architecture, and has now been unleashed with the full kinetic force of the most powerful navy in human history. The sea lanes have always belonged to whoever has the will and the warships to claim them. In February 2026, there is no ambiguity about who that is. The blockade holds, the oil does not flow, and the doctrine, born in the fires of the Second World War, completes its longest and most ruthless evolution. from a wartime necessity into the architecture of empire, enforced one tanker at a time on the warm and unforgiving waters of the Caribbean Sea. History isn't shaped by accidents, but by strategies decades in the making. If you value this kind of depth, leave a like and subscribe to join us for the next chapter. Thank you for watching. We'll see you at the next frontier.